as well as tackling questions on tax reform and saying the president's relationship with German Chancellor Angela Merkel is just fine. Let's bring in Simon Rosenberg, president and founder of the New Democrat Network and a former campaign advisor to President Bill Clinton. Matt Schlapp is chairman of the American Conservative Union and former White House political director for President George W. Bush. Matt, let me start with you. So it was kind of smooth and even there for a long time, and at the end it started to get a bit more contentious, then it was over. What's your take?
I think that these White House briefings are they're great television. And the question that the Trump administration has to keep asking itself is, are they driving the message they want to drive? I think Sean came out at the beginning of that briefing with their perspective on the trip. By and large, everybody is praising the trip. It was a great trip. And then we get into the question and answer part of it, and not so sure that helps push the message.
Okay, but it is kind of a question of what is the message, I guess, because the very first question, like you said, was about the Jared Kushner story, and it was kind of a question that was like, when did you stop beating your wife? But let's listen to it, and I will let Simon react on the other side. Let's listen.
I'm wondering, Sean, if you can tell us when the president knew, whether the president knew at the time that Jared Kushner was seeking to establish back-channel communications at the Russian embassy to the Russian government. And if he didn't know at the time, when did he find out?
I think that assumes a lot, and I would just say that Mr. Kushner's attorney has said that Mr. Kushner has volunteered to share with Congress what he knows about these meetings.
Okay, so Simon, I don't blame them for asking the question. I mean, it's one of those things, we're supposed to be confrontational as journalists, but it was skewed in a direction of a lot of assumptions. How did you think he handled the answer?
Well, look, I think a lot of the answers to these things are going to come out through the investigation that the FBI and the House and the Senate are going to do.
But we're talking about the tone of the press conference. I mean, how did you think that, how did he deal with the substance?
I think this is the way it works, right? I mean, our show sometimes, you have to admit, gets a little contentious, you and I, right? We've had some headbanging before.
That's true.
And that's, that's part of the system. And I think that the journalists did their job today and Sean did his.
Yeah. Matt, what did you think about the way he went back? Because it was a little different at the beginning than the end.
Right.
I mean, he did that thing where he said, look, that assumes a lot of things, facts not in evidence. We obviously don't agree. Let's move on. And that's one way of handling it that it seemed like at the very beginning of Sean Spicer's tour here as press secretary, he was being pushed to do something different to kind of get in people's faces like he did at the end. What do you think is more effective in the end?
I guess I would say that on the question that you asked to Simon about the very first question on Jared, Sean's job is not to give Jared Kushner's lawyer statements. He simply says there's an investigation going on. I refer you to the FBI or I refer you to that counsel. He doesn't have to be that go-between. At least that would be my advice, and I think it's true in all these basic questions, which is to step out of the confrontation that involves Russia or an investigation. It's really not Sean's job to be the person to weigh in on those questions. There's an investigation going on, and the White House is hands off. So just refer all those questions to them. I think it'll take a lot of heat out of that room.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. Like, Simon, if you were up at the podium and that was your job, would your goal be to kind of take the air out of what's going on, to just deflate it or turn down the temperature? Do you think that's the optimal strategy?
Matt and I were talking about this earlier before we came on, and that, I think Sean Spicer would benefit from just being funnier and having more levity at the podium. I mean, he's so serious, right? And he seems nervous, and I think it helps reinforce this sort of, he's on the edge, and so the reporters are going after him. I don't think he does a particularly good job. I know Sean, by the way. I've been on panels with him. I mean, I think he's a good guy, but I don't think he's a terribly effective spokesperson for the White House.
Yeah. Matt, with the change at the top there, the communications director leaving the White House, do you think we see a change in who's at the podium?
Oh, I have no idea. I will tell you this. I believe that the president does like a lot of these top officials he has advising him, but I think he believes they have a job to do, and I think he wants to execute in a much higher level, and I think he's giving them the time to try to make fixes. Mike Dupke was one of those fixes. Mike's a great guy, and I think he did the right thing to move on, but I think he's giving his team time to put it together. I will just say, I think Sean's a really likable and funny guy. I think he's got he's got a great personality. I think he's in a tough job.
Yeah.
And I think he's just got to learn a way to deal in this era of an investigation going on, how he does his job differently.
Yeah, it is a tough job.